Today we're back with Chapter 9 of Lois Lowry's Number the Stars. This chapter is called, Why Are You Lying? Now in this chapter, I want us to look at this story as a coming-of-age story. Previously, we've been looking at Number the Stars, particularly under the lens of historical fiction. Now it's still a historical fiction story, but in this chapter, we get to see a moment of growth for Annemarie. We get to see part of her transformation from child to adolescent. She's starting to do for herself, think for herself, ask questions, and even name who she is or what she's like. So I want us to look at those moments as she grows from child to adolescence in this coming-of-age story. All right, let's get started. Chapter 9, Why Are You Lying? Annemarie went outside alone after supper. Through the open kitchen window, she could hear Mama and Ellen talking as they washed the dishes. Kirsty, she knew, was busy on the floor, playing with the old dolls she had found upstairs. The dolls that had been Mama's once, long ago. The kitten had fled when she tried to dress it and disappeared. Poor Thor. She wandered to the barn where Uncle Henrik was milking Blossom. He was kneeling on the straw-covered floor beside the cow, his shoulder pressed against her heavy side, his strong tanned hands rhythmically urging her milk into the spotless bucket. The god of thunder sat alertly poised nearby, watching. Blossom looked up at Annemarie with big brown eyes and moved her wrinkled mouth like an old woman adjusting false teeth. Annemarie leaned against the ancient splintery wood of the barn wall and listened to the sharp rattling sound of streams of milk as they hit the sides of buckets. Uncle Henrik glanced over at her and smiled without pausing in the rhythm of the milking. He didn't say anything. Through the barn windows, the pinkish light of the sunset fell in irregular shapes upon the stacked hay. Flecks of dust and straw floated there in the light. "Uncle Henrik," Annemarie said suddenly, her voice cold. "You are lying to me. You and Mama both." His strong hands continued deftly pressing like a pulse against the cow. The steady streams of milk still came. He looked at her again, his deep blue eyes kind and questioning. "You are angry," he said. "Yes, Mama has never lied to me before, never. But I know there is no great Aunt Bertie. Never once in all the stories I've heard, in all the old pictures I've seen, has there been a great Aunt Bertie." Uncle Henrik sighed. Blossom looked back at him as if to say, "Almost done." And indeed, the streams of milk lessened and slowed. He tugged at the cow gently but firmly, pulling down the last of the milk. The bucket was half full, frothy on the top. Finally, he set it aside and washed the cow's udder with clean, damp cloth. Then he lifted the bucket to a shelf and covered it. He rubbed the cow's neck affectionately. At last, he turned to Annemarie as he wiped down his own hands with the cloth. "How brave are you, little Annemarie?" he asked suddenly. She was startled and dismayed. It was a question she did not want to be asked. When she had asked it of herself, she did not like her own answer. "Not very," she confessed, looking at the floor in the barn. Tall Uncle Henrik knelt before her so that his face was level with hers. Behind him, Blossom lowered her head, grasped a mouthful of hay in her mouth, and drew it in with her tongue. The kitten cocked its head, waiting and still hoping for spilled milk. "I think that's not true," Uncle Henrik said. "I think you are like your mama, and like your papa, and like me. Frightened, but determined. And if the time came to be brave, I am quite sure you would be very, very brave. But," he added, "it is much easier to be brave if you do not know everything. And so your mama does not know everything. Neither do I. We only know what we need to know." "Do you understand what I'm saying?" he asked, and looked into her eyes. Annemarie frowned. She wasn't sure. What did bravery mean? She had been very frightened the day, not long ago, though now it seemed far in the past, when the soldier had stopped her on the street and asked questions in a rough voice. And she had not known everything then. She had not known that the Germans were going to take away the Jews. And so when the soldier asked, looking at Ellen that day, "What is your friend's name?" she had been able to answer him, even though she was frightened. If she had known everything, it, it would not have been so easy to be brave. She began to understand just a little. "Yes," she said to Uncle Henrik, "I think I understand." "You guessed correctly," he told her. "There is no great Aunt Bertie, and never has been. Your mama lied to you, and so did I. We did so," he explained, "to help you be brave, because we love you. Will you forgive us for that?" Annemarie nodded. She felt older suddenly. "And I'm not going to tell you any more, not now, for the same reason. Do you understand?" Annemarie nodded again. Suddenly, there was a noise outside. Uncle Henrik's shoulders stiffened. He rose quickly, went to the window of the barn, and stood in the shadows and looked out. Then he turned back to Annemarie. "It's the hearse," he said. "It's Great Aunt Bertie, who never was." He smiled wryly. "So, my little friend, it is time for the night of mourning to begin. Are you ready?" Annemarie took her uncle's hand and led her from the barn. Let's talk about that little exchange. Our key question there is, are you brave, Annemarie? And I want to remember those two moments that we're flashing back to in this chapter. First, she remembers that moment in chapter 1 in which the soldier stopped her and asked about her friend. She realizes that at that time she didn't even really understand exactly why the soldiers were there. She didn't really know that Ellen was in danger. And because of that, she was able to maintain composure, answer the question, and move along. So, ironically, in this sense, her lack of knowledge has helped her be more brave. Later, she thought about that night when she sat alone and reflected and wondered about her patriotism towards King Christian X and if the people of Denmark would also protect the Jewish people the way that they would protect their king. Even more so, she wondered if she individually had what it took to protect her family and to protect her best friends. As we're growing, as we get older, it's totally normal to have these moments of reflection. Lois Lowry is showing us a girl who's growing. She's showing us a girl in transition. And Annemarie's bravery is even more interesting because Annemarie is not quite sure of it. So as we learn about this character, she's also learning about herself. That's part of growing up and part of Annemarie's coming of age story. Let's continue on to the next section in part 2 of this video.